My name is Nova, and what I'm about to tell you isn't just a story about love, or betrayal, or even revenge. It's a story about time itself, about being forced to confront every version of my relationship, past, present, and future, all because of one stupid fight in my kitchen. But don't be fooled. This isn't some quirky sci-fi comedy. It turned dark. It turned raw. And it revealed secrets I wish I'd never seen. It started on a rainy Thursday night. I was in the kitchen, scrubbing at a greasy pan like it had personally insulted me. My boyfriend, Eli, was supposed to be helping. But instead, he sat on the couch scrolling on his phone, half watching some late-night rerun. "Are you seriously just gonna sit there while I do everything?" I snapped, tossing the sponge into the sink. He sighed, like I'd interrupted the most important thing in the world. "Nova, it's just a few dishes. Relax." That word. Relax. I swear, it's gasoline on every woman's fire. I stormed into the living room, my voice climbing. "It's never just dishes, Eli. It's the laundry, the bills, the errands, everything. You act like I'm your maid." He fired back, standing now. "And you act like I do nothing, Nova. God, you always blow things out of proportion." We were nose to nose, spitting fire, when my elbow knocked into an old box stacked in the corner. The lid popped off, and inside was this contraption. I'd seen it before. It had belonged to Eli's late uncle, a reclusive inventor. A weird thing with blinking lights, dials, and switches, like a prop stolen off a sci-fi set. We always joked it was his mad scientist toy. But that night, in the heat of our argument, Eli slammed his palm against it. And that's when the air split open. It wasn't like in movies, with swirly portals or glowing wormholes. It was more like the world, folded. The kitchen walls bent, color stretched, my stomach lurched, and then, suddenly, I was sitting at a cafe table. My hands shook around a steaming coffee cup. Across from me was Eli, but younger. His hair longer, his face boyish, his smile nervous. My chest tightened as I realized, this was our first date. "Oh God," I whispered. The younger me, bright-eyed, hopeful, still untouched by years of arguments, was sitting right beside me. And she didn't see me. No one did. It was like I'd been dropped into a memory, invisible. I watched as he told the same jokes that had once made me laugh until my ribs hurt. I saw how he looked at me, like I was the only star in the sky. And here's the thing, for a moment, I wanted to believe it again. To pretend none of the fights or bitterness had happened. But then I noticed something. A flicker. A glance. The younger Eli's eyes darted to the waitress, the same way the older Eli sometimes looked at women when he thought I wasn't watching. That small betrayal, hidden even back then, planted a seed in my chest. The cafe dissolved, replaced by our old apartment. The air was thick with tension, the smell of burnt toast lingering. I recognized this night instantly, our first big fight. "You never listen, Eli." Younger me shouted, her face red. "You care more about your job than me." "You're being ridiculous," he snapped, shoving papers into his briefcase. "I'm doing this for us. You just don't get it." I stood there, a ghost in my own past, feeling the ache of words that had carved scars still tender years later. And then I noticed something I'd forgotten. When I stormed into the bedroom crying, Eli had picked up his phone and dialed someone. His voice was low, careful. "She's losing it again," he whispered into the receiver. "No, she won't find out." My stomach flipped. Who was he talking to? Was it just a friend? Or was it something more? The thought burned in me like acid. Had the betrayal started that early? The room twisted again. I braced myself, clutching my chest, and landed in a house I didn't recognize. It was bigger, colder, filled with expensive furniture that didn't feel like mine. And there, in the living room, was Eli. Older now. Hardened. Sitting beside a woman who was not me. She was younger, perfectly polished, her hand resting casually on his knee like she'd always belonged there. Then I heard it. A little girl's voice, not Sophie, not ours, but hers. "Daddy, can you play with me?" I froze. A daughter. His daughter. In this future that wasn't mine. My knees went weak. My throat closed. All those years of fights, of trying, of believing we could fix things, and this was where it ended? Him replacing me, building a life with someone else, while I was erased from the picture? I wanted to scream. I wanted to tear the walls down. But I couldn't touch anything. I was trapped in the vision of my own possible erasure. When the world snapped back, I was in my kitchen again, Eli standing across from me, his face pale and shaken. "Did you see it too?" he whispered. I stared at him, my chest heaving. "I saw everything, Eli. Our beginning. Our fights. Our ending." And in that silence, I knew two things. The time machine hadn't just shown us memories. It had shown us truths. The lies that had been there from the start, and the betrayal waiting in the future. I couldn't go back to pretending. This wasn't just about chores anymore. It was about survival. About justice. About rewriting the ending before it wrote me out of existence. And so, right there in that kitchen, with the hum of the time machine still echoing in the air, I made a vow. If Eli thought he could lie his way through our past and sneak into a future without me, he had no idea what kind of reckoning was coming. Because this wasn't just a fight anymore. It was the beginning of my revenge. When you come face to face with your own future, it changes you. After that night, nothing felt the same. Eli tried to act like it was just a weird hallucination, like maybe we'd both been exhausted, imagining things. But me? I knew better. The time machine hadn't lied. It had peeled the curtain back, showed me the rot underneath. And once you've seen the cracks in the glass, you can't unsee them. The next morning, he was whistling in the kitchen like nothing had happened. Making coffee. Buttering toast. Acting normal. But I couldn't stop staring at him. His smile looked too polished. His movements too rehearsed. And the way he avoided my eyes? That said everything. "Eli," I asked softly, testing him. "Do you remember what we saw?" He paused mid-butter, the knife clinking against the plate. "It was just nonsense, Nova. Dreams stitched together. Don't overthink it." There it was again, the gaslighting. The same tone he used in every fight when I was inches away from truth. I forced a smile, but inside, my chest was burning. I'd seen him with another woman. I'd seen a child who wasn't mine. And something in me whispered, that wasn't just the future. That was a warning. Over the next week, I started noticing things I'd ignored before. His phone suddenly glued to him, even in the bathroom. Late night work calls, with the office, his voice hushed behind the closed door. The faint smell of perfume on his jacket, a scent that wasn't mine. And the lies, oh, the lies. One evening, he told me he had to stay late at work to finish a presentation. But when I opened our joint calendar, I saw he hadn't scheduled anything for that night. When I called the office line to check, the receptionist casually said, "Oh, Eli left early today." I hung up with my heart pounding. That was it. Proof. Not yet of who or why, but of something hidden. Every night, the time machine sat in the corner of the living room, humming faintly like it was daring me to touch it again. I resisted for days, afraid of what else it might show me. But curiosity is a cruel companion. One stormy evening, when Eli claimed he'd be working late again, I switched it on. The air folded. My stomach dropped. And suddenly, I was standing outside a hotel lobby. Through the glass doors, I saw Eli. His hand on the small of a woman's back. Her hair long and auburn, her laughter sharp. They walked to the elevator together, close enough to brush shoulders. He leaned in, whispering something that made her tilt her head back and laugh harder. Then, his hand slid into hers. The elevator doors closed, and my heart shattered. The time machine had confirmed what my gut already screamed: Eli wasn't just lying. He was cheating. When he came home that night, smelling faintly of whiskey and hotel soap, I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw the truth in his face. But instead, I played it calm. "How was work?" I asked. He gave me that same polished smile. "Exhausting. Meetings ran late." "Really?" I tilted my head. "Because when I called, they said you left early." For the first time, I saw his mask slip. Just for a second. His jaw tightened, his eyes flickered. Then he laughed like I was some paranoid little fool. "Nova, come on. Don't do this. You know how you get when you start spinning stories in your head. Gaslighting." Again. And I let him do it, that night. But only because I had a bigger plan forming. A few days later, something strange happened. I was leaving the grocery store when a woman in a gray coat brushed past me, slipping a folded note into my hand. My pulse spiked. I glanced around, but she was gone in the crowd. The note said only one thing. "He isn't who you think he is. Room 314. Friday. 9 p.m. My hands shook as I read it again and again. Who was she? How did she know me? And what did she mean? Friday couldn't come fast enough. That night, I drove to the hotel with my heart pounding so loud it drowned out the rain on the windshield. Room 314. The hallway smelled of carpet cleaner and cheap cologne. I stood there, staring at the brass numbers, my breath shallow. Then, muffled laughter slipped through the door. A man's voice, his voice. And a woman's giggle, unmistakable. I pushed the door open just a crack. And there he was. Eli. Shirt half unbuttoned. Glass of wine in his hand. Sitting on the edge of the bed with the auburn-haired woman beside him. Her lipstick smudged. His tie draped around her shoulders. My stomach twisted so hard I thought I might collapse. But then, it got worse. Because I recognized her. She wasn't just some stranger. She was Lila. My best friend. The room spun. My ears rang. Of all the women in the world, it had to be her. The one I'd confided in. The one who'd sat in my kitchen drinking coffee while I cried about Eli's distance. I pulled back from the door, shaking, bile rising in my throat. Their laughter felt like a blade slicing through my skin. My mind screamed with memories, birthday parties, girls' nights, whispered secrets. And all along, she'd been waiting for her chance to sink her claws into him. That betrayal cut deeper than Eli's. I drove home in silence, gripping the wheel until my knuckles turned white. My body trembled with fury, heartbreak, disbelief. But underneath all that chaos, something else bloomed. Something cold. Something sharp. Revenge. Because Eli and Lila thought they could break me. They thought I'd cry, beg, crumble. They thought I'd stay the quiet little star orbiting their selfish galaxy. But they forgot one thing. I'd seen the future. And I wasn't going to let it happen. I drove straight past our house and ended up at the old pier, the one Eli and I used to go to when things were simple. Rain sliced the sky into silver strips and the water caught every ruined thought I had. I sat in the car until the wipers gave out and watched the small waves hit the pylons, one relentless motion over and over, like the way my heart kept beating even when everything inside it felt like it had collapsed. How do you make sense of two betrayals at once? The word betrayal is small and polite, it can't carry what I felt. Shame, fury, humiliation, the biting sting of having your private life rebranded into a cheap hotel story. But underneath the human noise was a new, stranger ache. The time machine vision still sat heavy in my chest. The younger Eli, the first fight, the family I might never have. They were evidence that his betrayal wasn't a single stumble. It was part of a pattern. There's a moment when pain turns to resolve. For me, it happened when I thought of Sophie's bedroom, the nightlight, the stack of picture books, the way her hair smelled like baby shampoo when she fell asleep. Whatever I did next had to be about protecting that small, soft world. Not about crushing people for sport. Not about being some movie plot witch. It had to be clean, surgical, and final. I pulled my phone out and texted Melissa one word, come. She arrived with 2 coffees and the look of someone who knows how to steady a friend. We sat on my couch, the time machine humming like a wounded animal in the corner, and I told her everything. Not the hotel room first, she already suspected something, but the machine. The visions. The future. The child. Melissa listened without interrupting. When I finished, she set her cup down like it was an anchor. You saw the future, she said. You can use it. No, I said. I won't use it to play God. I'll use it to avoid being erased. My voice cracked and then steadied. I'm not sure what kind of person I want to be. But I know what kind of mother I need to be. She reached across and squeezed my hand. What's the plan? Making a plan was oddly comforting. It restored part of the world where choices existed. I allowed myself to be strategic, clinical in a way I'd never been in love. Step 1, gather undeniable evidence. That part was easy now that I had the hotel memory and the note about room 314. Eli and Lila had been sloppy, their comfort around each other made them careless. Lila kept a little online breadcrumb trail. Eli had borrowed my tablet once and forgot to log out of an app that synced messages to the cloud. Amateur mistake, huge payoff. I set up a secure folder on a drive I knew only I could access, backed up screenshots, recorded times, and downloaded credit card receipts that proved hotel charges. I emailed copies to myself and to an anonymous account, protection against tampering. It felt like building a vault. Step 2, the narrative. The truth is a blunt instrument if it's tossed in public without ground. People will carve it into whatever shape suits them, sympathy for the other woman, pity for the unmoored man. To control the narrative, you need tone, context, and timing. I worked on a script, not to be cruel, but to tell our story plainly, what happened, how it affected Sophie, what our boundaries were. No theatrical screams, no performed heartbreak. Just facts and a backbone. Step 3, allies. You can't topple a man's image alone. You need witnesses, people who can corroborate your story and who won't be swayed by charm or a good suit. Melissa was first. My father, who has seen more human folly than I have, was second. A quiet investigator I hired, honest, professional, and ethically rigid, became the third. He could get statements without drama. He could verify that Lila had been meeting Eli in places and that the pattern was not just a weekend fling. We weren't aiming to blow up lives for sport. We were protecting a child and reclaiming truth. Between all those practical moves, the machine kept whispering its own temptations. It felt wrong in one sense, like cheating the universe, but right in another. I had previews of the future, so why not use them to select the least damaging path? I stepped into that moral gray more than once, watching 2 different futures for the same decision, one where I took a scalding scorched earth path and Sophie's life was collateral damage, and another where I used exposure and legal protection to remove Eli from daily life without wrecking our child's financial security. Ethics in revenge is a strange thing to map. It's so easy to be moral when the enemy is a villain in a book. It's harder when the villain is someone you once put your hand in and believed. We rehearsed scenarios. I'd go to the machine alone late at night and test the water, watching slightly different versions of events play out when I acted in different ways, confront him publicly and watch him spin a story, take calm, documented legal steps and watch the firm swallow him whole, disappear with Sophie and watch his life crumble but my daughter's future be safe. The machine, maddeningly, didn't allow me to change the past, only to see variations of the present and probable futures. It was a compass, not a map. One vision I could not stomach, me walking away, bitter, leaving Sophie with rooms stacked with moving boxes and a financial scramble because I let fury drive me to destroy without thinking. The machine showed me Sophie older, resentful, asking why her mother chose vengeance over stability. I woke from that one with my chest raw. So the plan I chose was the narrow line between power and prudence, expose his betrayal in a way that would force accountability, use legal protections to shield Sophie, and make sure everyone who mattered, his colleagues, our family, the people in our daughter's school community, knew the truth in a manner that prioritized Sophie's dignity. I wanted him stripped of the ability to reinvent himself without consequence. Not wrecked just for revenge, but confronted with the reality that choices have public results. That meant timing. It also meant a weapon I hadn't considered at first, spectacle. Not because I wanted to shame him, but because I'd seen how applause built him. I wanted to remove the applause in front of the people who fed it. The gala night at his firm, the one where he was set to be honored, was the perfect stage. We could expose him there, in front of those who trusted him. The machine had shown me his public life crumbling like a bad set of cards and that image fueled me. But this time we'd script it so people couldn't rewrite the story into his favor. Melissa arranged a fake, charity liaison, position so she could get us a table up front. My father talked to an old friend at a local paper who could ensure attention. The investigator collected sworn statements and timestamps and built a timeline that would make it impossible for a PR spin to drown out the facts. None of it felt pretty. I stopped picking up the little text messages Eli sent in the mornings with half-hearted pet names. I stopped pretending his jokes were still funny. I learned to look at him as evidence and motive rather than as a man I loved. It was survival remodeling my heart into armor. But revenge planning isn't only paperwork and PR. It's a private war with ghosts. There were nights I curled up in the bathtub and sobbed until the water turned cold. There were nights I held Sophie and let the smell of her hair steady me. There were meetings with lawyers where negotiation felt like a game of chess, but real-time loss in the balance. I began to pull apart the way love had been used as a currency. Eli's apologies were rehearsed lines now, and Lila's absence from my social feeds only made her presence heavier. Then, a complication. The investigator's last call made my blood run cold. "Nova," he said over the line, voice a bass hum of reliability, "you need to see this." He sent me an encrypted file. Inside were copies of messages between Eli and someone else, not Lila. A string of conversations dated months earlier where Eli had met with a man from a small startup and signed papers. It wasn't criminal, but it hinted at a second life. Consulting gigs at odd hours, names I'd never heard whispered in the same breath as our home. That other life could explain the distance, the late nights, some of the absences. It didn't excuse the affair, but it layered motives that made the whole thing bigger than one woman's betrayal. I let the thought sit, maybe the betrayal wasn't only romantic. Maybe it was a hunger for reinvention, and Lila was the mirror he used to see himself new. That realization narrowed my rage into something useful. Clarity about motive helps you plan smarter. We mapped out the exact chronology, the hotel stays, the suspicious dates, the online receipts. Each detail was a nail, hammered one by one. I tested leaks, small, controlled releases to see if the story would be absorbed by the firm's PR machine or if it would bleed into the public. Each time, we adjusted. Each time, Eli's arrogance showed. He thought he could charm his way out. He kept sending me little notes, apology stamped, please for understanding. I saved every one. On the night before the gala, I sat in front of the machine and let it show me one final rehearsal, me on stage, voice steady, laying out a narrative that was factual and precise. I saw the mentor's face go from congratulatory to hollow. I saw the applause die. I felt the cold relief of having done the right thing. But the machine, always capricious, gave me one last image I had not counted on, Lila, alone, at a bus stop, mascara running, phone glowing with a message from Eli, it's over. It's complicated. The machine offered no explanation for context, only the human aftershock. Seeing her like that tugged at something I hadn't expected. It wasn't sympathy so much as the recognition that human lives spiral outward from small selfish acts, and sometimes the waves hit people who didn't even know how far they'd go. I closed my eyes and said aloud, this ends tomorrow. Not with fire. With truth. With law. With a daughter held safely on my hip. Melissa squeezed my hand in the dark. You sure you're ready? She asked. I thought of Sophie's sleeping face, the way she tucks a stuffed bear under her chin. I imagined the future I had insisted on, a life that had me in it, not as a shadow to his success. And then I nodded. Ready, I said. We double-checked the evidence, rehearsed the script, and set the stage. The gala was 3 days away. Eli was unaware that I knew everything, Lila was still at large, pretending to be friends, and the machine sat in the corner, a quiet accomplice. I tucked the digital drive into a hidden compartment and went to bed thinking one ugly, fierce thought. If he thought he could remake our future without me, he was about to find out the cost. 3 days. 3 days until the gala where I'd chosen to pull the curtain back. The odd little machine hummed in the corner, its lights blinking like a heartbeat. I'd packed evidence into a digital vault and into real paper copies. I'd rehearsed my words until my voice was the metronome of truth. I'd told Sophie she was staying with Melissa that night, a sleepover filled with popcorn and cartoons, and I watched her leave the house with a backpack and an oblivious smile, the way children carry themselves when adult storms are happening far above their heads. The night of the gala, the hotel ballroom looked like the inside of a jewelry box, chandeliers, polished silverware, people in tuxes and gowns who moved through the world as if their applause were currency. Eli looked every bit the man who'd built his armor by collecting praise. He smiled as people queued to shake his hand. He wore the kind of confidence I used to find endearing. Now it looked brittle. Melissa sat beside me at the table, fingers clenched around a water glass. My father had called in a favor and a reporter friend from the morning paper had seats in the second row. The investigator was in a dark suit near the back with a laptop open, ready to provide timestamps if anyone tried to dispute the chronology. We'd covered every practical base. I had a small envelope in my clutch that would be the first domino, a simple note slipped to the mentor as he prepared to speak. He'd been a father figure to Eli's career. I wanted the mentor's voice to be the one that first confronted the discrepancy between image and reality. Not me. I wanted the exposure to feel like truth, not a personal vendetta. The optics mattered. The night started like any gala. Appetizers, polite conversation, the gentle drone of deals and small talk. I watched Daniel, Eli, move through the room, his laughter polished, his handshakes tight. He left the table to accept the plaque. The mentor moved to the podium first with his practiced lines about integrity and the firm's values. A waiter passed by, and I slipped the envelope across to the mentor. He felt the paper, frowned at the name on it, and opened it. The room's hum dulled. He read. The paper had a line at the top, for you to know. His expression changed, the way someone's face goes from stage light warmth to private alarm. He looked over to where Eli stood, speaking to a partner. He raised his hand slightly, an odd, almost imperceptible click to the microphone, and said something that made the MC pause. "I've been given material I did not expect," he said. The auditorium shifted. Conversations dipped as if the air had been vacuumed out of the room. "Before we proceed, I need to address something that concerns our values as a firm." When he held up his phone, the projector caught on the big screen behind him. The first screenshot, time-stamped, glowed there, a message thread, details circled, hotel receipts printed out like confessions. In the front rows, I could see faces changing. The partners' smiles thinned. A reporter's fingers flew over a phone. Eli's smile died in slow motion. He tried to laugh it off. He opened his mouth, words like rehearsed offenses ready to spill. But the mentor, blunt, voice shaking, announced the firm would postpone the award and that there would be an internal review. He asked for transparency. He said something I had not expected but secretly hoped for: "If what these documents suggest is true, we must address it openly." The applause that would have greeted Eli never came. The sound the room made was different now, awkward percussive silence, the small cough of people recalibrating their attention. That was the first public wound. It wasn't the assassination of his life, but it was the first audible crack of his facade. The PR team tried to stage a quick recovery, a few carefully placed cameras and a spokesperson's script about support and ongoing review, but the seed had been planted. People began to whisper. The firm's compliance department already had the investigator's number. By the next afternoon, the story was not only city gossip but the morning's online headline: "Firm under scrutiny, senior staff involved in personal misconduct." I felt my chest unclench in a way I hadn't allowed myself to feel in months. This was working. The applause was gone and with it, the cushion Eli had used to land his lies. But the gala was only the beginning. My plan had layers: legal, social, and personal, and the next moves would have to be timed with surgical precision. The second move was to ensure Sophie's safety. Public exposure can slide into vindictiveness if it's not contained, and I never wanted my daughter's childhood to be collateral damage. The investigator had already filed a dossier with a family law attorney I trusted. We filed for temporary protective custody the morning after the gala. The judge, swayed by the documented timeline and an argument that Eli's actions had created an unstable environment for a minor, signed temporary custody and visitation terms. The law, dry and infuriatingly procedural, felt like a shield in my hands. Eli's reaction was a mix of disbelief and rage. "You can't do this," he said when his lawyer called me, voice tight, whether from shame or fury I couldn't tell. He threatened legal countersuits, defamation claims, the usual performative roar of a man who believed reputation was a currency he could always borrow against. I sat with my lawyer, calm and precise, providing copies of messages, receipts, hotel check-ins. Every time he threatened, we filed a new protective document. Every time he spun a story, our evidence was the weave that tied the narrative together. Publicly, he tried to reclaim dignity. He posted a hollow statement on social media about mistakes and private pain and asked for privacy. But privacy is a poor strategy once a pattern is documented. The firm froze his accounts. A handful of clients suspended contracts pending review. It wasn't criminal, yet, but it was a wedge. And then came the twist I hadn't planned for, the one that landed like a punch to the ribs in the quiet after the storm. A local TV crew requested an interview. They had seen the online material and wanted to put the story on air. The reporter, well-meaning and hungry for clicks, had a different angle. He wanted a human confession to air. My father insisted we stay out of anything sensational. Melissa argued we had to be strategic. I agreed to one pre-recorded interview where I would tell the story cleanly, the way we'd rehearsed: facts, impact, protection. After I filmed, the reporter asked casually, "Is there anyone else you think should be aware? Any other women? Any other partners?" I considered the machine then, its flaring images still fresh in my head. I thought of the envelope that had shown Daniel with a different woman years earlier, the note: "Some secrets are older than affairs." For a split second I flirted with the idea of using the machine to go public with a history I hadn't planned to expose. But that felt like opening a ragged wound that might bleed in directions I couldn't predict. I kept my head. I gave the interview the firm, the custody, the child-first argument. I did not dredge up every old secret. Mercy, I decided, was part of my plan. Not for his sake, for mine. The interview aired that night. Viewers flooded the station's site. Comments poured in, some supportive, some vicious. Lila's name trended briefly as people connected the dots. She posted a short, tearful apology and an announcement that she was leaving town. Social sympathy fractured and reassembled in shards. The machine had once shown me how stories could bend public opinion. I used the interview to redirect it. It worked. But revenge, I learned, is rarely linear. Just when I thought the arc had peaked, I received an anonymous message that changed everything again. A photograph arrived at my inbox, an old Polaroid, the kind the machine might as well have spat out. Eli, much younger, arms slung around a woman I did not know, standing next to a battered car with a bumper sticker from a university I didn't recognize. On the back, in ink that had bled with age, a single line, "You were lucky she didn't find out then." The message felt like a cold hand on my spine. Who had sent it? What did it mean? If there were other secrets, older, deeper, then the story might not be only about an affair. The machine's whisper about older threads began to feel like a map of a whole other undercurrent in Eli's life. I called the investigator. He dove into it, following the university, cross-referencing old acquaintances. What he found was small and ugly, a pattern of leaving things unresolved, of taking new names and new starts while old wreckage collected like driftwood. It complicated motives, but it didn't excuse the present. My next shock came in a place I hadn't anticipated. Lila showed up at my front door. I wasn't home. Melissa was. They'd had enough of the social media storm and wanted to do something proactive. Lila rang the bell, eyes red, mascara smeared. Melissa, to her credit, let her in. She was a different woman than the one in the hotel room. Scared. Small. Human. "I didn't mean for any of this," she sobbed. "I thought he'd leave her. I thought he loved me. I never wanted Sophie hurt. I never." It was weakness, the human sort. Not an admission of malice. I didn't open my mouth when Melissa told me later. The machine had taught me something. Sometimes the people you want to punish are as shattered as the lives they helped break. But Lila's appearance opened an avenue for leverage I hadn't considered and that I refused to use: compassion. We could have weaponized her fear for the press, portray her as a calculating homewrecker. Instead, in a move that surprised even me, I proposed a meeting, truth, mediated, with a counselor present, where Lila and Eli would answer questions in a controlled environment. I didn't want public breakdowns. I wanted accountability. And if Lila would participate, it gave me a chance to gather sworn statements that showed intent and ongoing deception rather than messy emotional blurting that the public loves to misinterpret. Eli balked. He denied everything in private to his lawyer, claimed entrapment. But the investigator had time-stamped receipts and hotel records. Under pressure, he agreed to mediation. In that small conference room, awkward, fluorescent lit, Lila broke down and admitted to the affair, her words clutching at the air like a drowning person grabs at a rope. She sobbed, apologized, and said she thought she had been promised a future. The mediator's notes were precise, the investigator's sworn affidavit was meticulous. That transcript became the backbone of anything the firm or courts would need. The truth, when structured and notarized, lost its slipperiness. The last phase of my plan was personal, and harder than the legal moves: the confrontation at the lake house. It was the place Eli had used in a message to Lila, something I'd found in his drafts. He thought it was secret. He thought he had built rooms where no one would intrude. I chose that place for one reason: the lake had been where we'd once promised forever. I wanted to reclaim it as a scene of truth. I didn't confront him with rage. I asked him to meet, and he came with a smug sense of control. The day was raw and cold, the water still and glassy. I held the folder of documents like a talisman. I didn't scream. I didn't throw the accusations wildly. I laid the photos, the receipts, the texts on an outdoor table and watched as the man who'd once told me he wanted a family looked smaller than the sum of his choices. Why? I asked simply. He tried the usual refrains. I was lonely, it meant nothing, I'm sorry. He tried bargaining. He promised to quit, to change, to go to therapy. It was theatrical. It smelled of survival. I listened and then, quietly, explained the consequences, the custody order, the firm's review, the timeline that now existed in the public record. I told him I had no interest in destroying him. I wanted a future where Sophie was safe. His face crumpled, sometimes genuinely, sometimes performatively, and for a moment I believed regret might be real. Then he reached for my hand like a man trying to steady himself on a cliff's edge. It wasn't supposed to be like this, he said. I can fix it. Fix how? I asked. By lying through the next act. My voice was low, the sound of something that had once been bright now tempered into iron. You chose to build a life with deception in the corners. You chose to keep a future I'd never agreed to. We talked until the sun bled into the water and the air smelled like wet wood. He begged in ways that would have worked on the me of 5 years ago. But I'd seen too many versions of us by then, the naive young woman in the cafe, the hurting woman in the apartment, the erased woman in a future home I had no place in. I had no use for bargains dressed in charm. When he left, shoulders slumped, I felt the last thin thread of illusion fall away. It hurt, yes. But it was also release. The aftermath of the public moves was messy, as any real life is. The firm launched an investigation that led to internal disciplinary hearings. Some clients quietly moved their accounts. Eli's social circle thinned like a receding tide. A few people reached out privately to say they'd suspected something, that my courage had made it possible for them to speak, too. The investigator kept feeding the court and media the cold facts. The custody order held. There were nights of paperwork and depositions and more legal meetings than I'd imagined possible. I learned to sit in rooms with men who measured their words and not let their calm intimidate me. My voice became a tool for my daughter's life. But there was one final, human twist. One evening, months after the gala, Eli came to the house in a plain hoodie, carrying a small cardboard box. He left it on the porch and didn't ring the bell. Inside were things that belonged to me, a scarf I'd missing for months, a dog-eared paperback he'd once purchased for me, a receipt for a charity donation he'd made in our name years back. He'd thought those might buy his way back into the tiny circuits of memory. They did not. He wanted to show remorse. What they did was remind me what love used to look like, which made it hurt, but didn't change the truth. I risked a look across to him through the kitchen window. He lingered on the path like someone outside of a glass house watching the people move inside. I imagined him making a life that wasn't mine. Maybe that's what he needed to do to be honest to himself. Maybe his future would be smaller but simpler. Maybe he'd learn to live without the applause. When the machine hummed late at night, I sometimes thought about using it again, to peek, to be sure, to see if the ledger I'd started had balanced out. But I resisted. There are times the future is a temptation, and some doors, once opened, should remain shut. I'd set out to stop being erased. I'd taken the machine's threat and turned it into a timeline of accountability. In the end, the revenge was not poison or grand cruelties. It was truth, structured and public, and then the mundane work of rebuilding a life that honored my child and my dignity. A final envelope arrived 3 weeks after everything quieted down. Addressed in a hand I hadn't seen since the day we found the time machine, it read only, "For when you want to know what happens next." Inside was a single photograph, Sophie, older, laughing in front of a lake house I didn't recognize, and a note in a handwriting I did know, choose well. I folded the photo into my pocket and closed the attic door on the machine. The story had one last round of choices left. I was ready for them, not with vengeance but with something better, intention. When the storm finally broke, the silence was almost eerie. The headlines faded. The firm's investigation dragged on quietly in the background, like a machine turning gears far away from my daily life. Sophie's laughter filled my kitchen again, her drawings taped to the fridge, her requests for extra marshmallows and hot cocoa bringing me back to earth. Melissa said one night, over wine and Chinese takeout, "You won. You know that, right?" I didn't answer right away. Victory was complicated. I hadn't wanted to just win, I had wanted the truth to stand, even when I wasn't there to defend it. What mattered most was that Sophie's future was safe from the shadows Eli had created. Eli's fall wasn't spectacular. It wasn't the Hollywood ending where villains are marched out in handcuffs. Instead, it was quiet. His position at the firm was restructured. His clients dried up. The man who used to strut into rooms now avoided eye contact. He didn't lose everything, but he lost the illusion of being untouchable. And in some ways, that was a deeper punishment. The community judged him in whispers, not shouts. That's the thing about betrayal, people may forgive mistakes, but patterns? They never forget patterns. As for me, I rebuilt. I started small. A part-time teaching job at the community college, helping students untangle literature and storytelling. Sophie loved visiting the campus bookstore with me, picking out pencils shaped like owls. I told myself I wouldn't live in bitterness. Revenge had never been about burning Eli's life to ashes. It was about reclaiming mine. But the machine in the attic, it hummed still. Sometimes I swore I could hear it when the house was quiet at night, like it was calling to me. I resisted the temptation most nights. But on the evenings when Sophie was asleep at Melissa's, and the moonlight caught just right, I would climb the stairs and stare at it. That last envelope, the one with Sophie older, standing in front of a lake house, haunted me. Was it real? Was it a possible future or just another cruel trick? The note had said, "Choose well." Maybe that was the machine's final lesson. The future isn't fixed. It bends to the choices we make. Months later, Eli asked to meet. Not at the lake house, not at the firm, but at a quiet diner we used to visit years ago. Against my instincts, I went. He looked older. Not in years, but in weight, like he was carrying the debris of all the facades he'd built. He stirred his coffee, hands shaking. "I wanted to say I'm sorry," he whispered. For the first time, I believed him. Not because he said it with charm, but because he said it with nothing left to gain. I nodded. "I don't hate you," I said. "But I don't trust you. And that's the difference between past and future." He swallowed hard. Tears filled his eyes, but I didn't move to comfort him. That chapter was closed. We parted like ghosts of who we once were, shadows slipping in opposite directions. The real closure came weeks later, in a small, unexpected way. Sophie and I were planting flowers in the backyard. She dug her tiny hands into the soil and looked up at me with that blunt honesty only children have. "Mom," she asked, "are you happy now?" I paused. My throat tightened. I thought of the machine, the affair, the lies, the gala, the custody battle, the sleepless nights. I thought of the envelope with her older self smiling in a place I hadn't yet seen. I touched her cheek, kissed the top of her head, and said, "Yes, baby. I'm happy. Because we're safe. Because we're honest. And because we still have each other." Her grin was brighter than any chandelier at that cursed gala. And in that moment, I realized something. Revenge had never really been the endgame. Revenge was the bridge. The real victory was stepping off that bridge onto solid ground, with Sophie beside me, walking forward into a future I would build, choice by choice. That night, I went to the attic one last time. The machine glowed faintly in the dark, as if it knew I was there. The envelope with the photo still sat on the workbench. I traced my fingers over the image of Sophie older, standing in front of that lake house. I had the power to turn the machine back on. To peek, to meddle, to twist. But instead, I pulled the cord. The lights flickered and went out. The humming stopped. The silence was profound. I tucked the photo back into the envelope and slid it into a drawer. Maybe one day I'd look again. Maybe not. The future wasn't meant to be stolen from the shadows. It was meant to be earned in the light. And as I turned off the attic light and walked down the stairs, I realized something I'd never said out loud before. My name is Nova. I was erased once. But never again.